Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. We are delighted that you can join us today for this exciting webinar. We're joined with three companies, Vistatec, CA and Lingoport all together. Hopefully you can see everybody already in the room. Give us a wave if you're there. Hello everybody. We thank you very much for taking the time out to join us on today's webinar. My name is Simon Hodgkins. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Vistatec, and we're absolutely delighted that so many people from so many brands and companies have taken the time out to register and to join us today. So thank you very much indeed. We will be recording this webinar today. I know that's important in today's day and age. We will be sharing that recording with everybody who's registered for today's webinar, and that will normally be available to everybody within a short number of days following today's webinar. If you are used to the GoToWebinar software, you know how to ask a question, but just in case you're new to it, typically on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a panel. About 2/3 of the way down, you'll find a little button that says question. If you click on that, there's a free text box. Please feel free to type in any question in relation to today's webinar, and our expert panel of speakers that we have in the room for you today will do their utmost to answer it for you today. If you want to save your questions to the end, please do. But any question that you type in, we will see, and we'll be able to ask those questions for you and put them directly to our panel. So, we are joined with some wonderful speakers from the three companies today, Vistatec, CA and Lingoport. We're joined by Adam, who's obviously the CEO of Lingoport, and we're delighted, Adam, thank you for the wave, Adam, we're delighted that you can be with us today. Adam is going to be hosting the discussion today, which is not an easy task given the vibrant topics and questions that we'll be going through. He's joined around the table today by Suzanne Frank. She's the Director of Business Development at Vistatec. Hi, Suzanne. And Suzanne is ably joined by Laurie Cameron, the Vice President of Internationalization Services at Lingoport, and of course with David Thompson and Shay Boudreau, who are both with CA. David is the Systems Architect and Shay, the Principal Product Manager. So you're all very welcome. We're delighted to have such fantastic speakers to talk about this very interesting, deep topic, and I can't wait to see how the questions and answers go. So thank you once again to everybody for joining us. I'm going to keep quiet at this stage and hand over fully to Adam. Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Appreciate that introduction. All right. Just a quick note on the agenda. We'll be going through a number of questions here today that are oriented towards discussing how the globalization process went for Agile Central. We'll have a little bit of a background introduction, and then we'll go to an open discussion and Q&A session at the end. We're looking to round up the formal part of this presentation within a half an hour. However, please stay on. We're going to have a Q&A session. As Simon noted, there is a questionnaire box within the GoToMeeting interface. We are counting on you to ask us questions. It really makes for a good part of the show, and I encourage you to stay on for that. It's often some of the best outcomes of any webinar. All right, Simon, do you want to you actually have already done these introductions, so I'm going to speed by this. All right. So, Suzanne, do you want to talk a little bit about Vistatec?
Sure, absolutely. Let me get to that slide. So, again, thank you, everybody, for joining. A little background around Vistatec and this collaboration that we have begun with Lingoport. Vistatec has been in the language services space for 20 years. We provide translation, localization, language quality review, content creation, etc. To some of the most iconic brands on the globe. That being said, as far as our language quality review, a lot of people know us as the language quality company. We have taken some of the best in breed of error topologies, and that's TAOS, DQF, and MQM, and created what we call the Rolls-Royce of quality review services. So I just wanted to add that note to the quality portion. As far as our collaboration with Lingoport, Lingoport and Vistatec started to talk, I would say about 6 months ago, and yeah, about a year ago. Time flies. And we really realized very quickly that we had some of the same corporate culture and same desired outcomes in regards to the client, and making sure that we put the client first and that we were agile. And so it just kind of was one of those things where it became kind of very obvious to us early on that this was a collaboration that needed to take place. For those of you that aren't familiar with Vistatec, we're not venture capital full. We're not owned by Wall Street. All of our founders are part of the day-to-day operations, very similar to Lingoport. And so we found that because of that, we're quite agile and customer-centric, and that hence was born the collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'll just give a short background, and you'll go into detail in one of the slides, Shay. CA is really the parent company here. They purchased Rally software. I'll say that Rally on its own is really the. I actually like to say that you guys did a really good job making Agile and Rally software a synonym. You know, when I speak to developers, they just put the two together right away, even if they were using something else, which would be very strange, but it happens. It's a system to plan and orchestrate Agile development within the organization. There are a number of methodologies that are supported, and you can see a screenshot that I grabbed off here of, you know, it's a beautiful looking application. You can see there's a lot of user interface. Rally then was rebranded as Agile Central as part of CA, and we'll talk a little bit about the business case early on. All right, so just a little bit about Lingoport. By the way, you can all go to lingoport.com for more detail. We're very well known for our software. It's a whole suite of applications that provide a continuous internationalization and localization environment. It scales to the entire organization. It definitely supports Agile in a very big way. It's not always used in an Agile format, but we have a very good Agile story. I'll also say that Lingoport grew up really initially as a services company that wrote software as part of our initial development as a company, and the software was there to help us perform services. And the two of those, that kind of coexistence still happens, where our services and product development, they're separate organizations now as we've grown, but they really spend a lot of time. We use our own stuff, and that makes our services a lot more powerful in terms of how we can work with clients, because we already have all this measurement and dashboards and ways to manage disparate teams all on their own sprints and coexist with everyone. So it's just a little bit background. You can learn a lot more on the website. All right. So that's us. Again, this is all about how CA globalized Agile Central. And again, when I say Agile Central, it's Rally software, but Agile Central is the new name. Now, the first question I have here, I like to preface it here. Can you describe the business case for globalization work? I always like to preface that nobody internationalizes because it would be cool. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times in software development, you will have, you know, developers really often love what they do, and they will go home, or they will think about at some point, wow, I would really like to do this feature. I think this is really smart. And they might prototype it or even take a whack at doing the real thing over the weekend and come in and show it, because, you know, it's their expertise, it's what they love. But I've never seen somebody do that for internationalization. It's a very big undertaking. It's not particularly sexy from the developer point of view. So with that, let's talk to Shay. Tell us about the business case a little bit.
Sure. As you mentioned before, about 2 years ago, Rally Software got acquired by CA Technologies. CA has a very large global presence, and it was an area that we could easily fit into to have a wider reach of our customer base. We know that our U.S. market likes agile software development, and we know that there's markets outside of the U.S. that also like that. So we wanted to be able to take our product and provide value to other users everywhere else. And it helped us kind of fit into the ecosystem of our company and fit in with all these other products now as a complementary product to their things. We couldn't do that before if we just stayed within the U.S. So now we've just initially expanded our reach into Europe with the German language, and that just gives us a whole new market that we never would have been able to go into before. Those customers, we wouldn't have had customers before, and just being able to provide that value across the globe is really important to us.
So just to expand on that, sometimes I will hear with technical users that, oh, English is okay everywhere because they have to learn English as part of their learning to develop software. So maybe, this is by the way, she's not asking. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess my thought around that is that it's not what is required. So it's not about what's required from the business. You're absolutely correct. A lot of our users can use our software in English. It's more about how do we provide them a better experience and something that they're comfortable with. So they may not need our tool to be in their language to do the work, but they feel more comfortable when it's in their language. So it adds automatic value to them because it's comfortable, it's easy, it makes them feel like it's something that they can work into their life and use on a daily basis. And that's what we want. Like, we want to be something that makes them happy that it's in their language, and they don't, they feel comfortable with it.
Awesome answer. Awesome answer. Okay, great. Next question, and this is for Dave. What were your biggest concerns, such as time, quality, and disruption, prior to the project starting?
Yeah, so I think when we first started this project, we had no institutional knowledge around international or localization at all. So we really needed that expertise that we didn't have. I think some of the other things that we were worried about were we didn't want to just have a black box approach where we ship this off to a company and have it come back 6 months later. We wanted to find someone we could work with as a team. So Gloria's team was able to do things like submit and review pull requests and engage in our planning process, so that they essentially worked as one of our internal teams. That was one of the the big things for us, was not having it be totally external, but having it work like the rest of the development in our organization.
Thanks. Okay. Another question for Dave. What were some of the criteria you were considering in terms of vendor support? And this might be a bit of a repeat of that.
Yeah, so some of what I just said was some of the criteria that we're looking for. Some of the other things are, we have an agile process and we do DevOps. So all of our systems, one of the things is we have a lot of systems, a lot of different languages, and a lot of different repos. So the ability to work in an environment where you're working with multiple stacks, multiple languages was really important.
Right.
Most of those systems are continuously integrated, and or all of them are continuously integrated, and most of them are continuously deployed. So for example, our main product could get deployed up to 20 times a day.
Wow.
So it was important to find someone that could work in that environment where they're continually integrating code and understanding the process, where if I make a commit, it could go out to production within the next 15 minutes. So that was really important for us. I think if you look at, I'm sure other companies are doing this, but if you look around at what's available, there's not a lot of published information around how to do that, how to do localization in an environment like that. So I think we broke some ground there.
Nice. I will clarify that when Dave talks about languages, he's talking about programming languages there.
Yes, sorry.
That range from like Java to Clojure, within your application. So there certainly was a lot in between. All right. Slide. Lori, yes. Can you take us through the process of how you got your arms around Agile Central? It's a very large application for planning and implementation.
Yeah. So at Lingoport, we always start these engagements with a pretty detailed assessment, and we did that with CA. We meet with developers, we meet with product management, and we're basically trying to figure out what are your internationalization requirements. And at the same time, we're meeting on code detail, architecture, and at the same time, we're also using our Globalizer software to scan, actually looking for the internationalization issues. Adam talked about how we, services and products come together, and this is where a big part of it happens, because we would not be able to give an idea of how long this would take or how many resources unless we kind of had that code level detail. And then once we do that, we've got the detailed task list, which can evolve over time and did evolve over time, but it basically gives us a really good understanding of what components we're going to be looking at, what programming languages, and what are the internationalization issues that are going to be addressed in each of those components.
All right, great. Thank you, Lori. And this one's for both Shay and Lori. What were some of the difficulties and successes?
Well, I think early on, a little bit of the difficulty was trying to figure out how to pull Lingoport into our processes, into our, we asked them particularly to estimate the way we estimate and to be on the same iterations and be in the same planning cadence and to deliver things the same way. And the reason we asked that is it created transparency within our product for leadership to be able to see how we were progressing, and it made collaboration a lot easier amongst the team. And like Dave said, we wanted a company that would pull in and work as one of our teams, and they did. I think setting it up was a little bit challenging, but then also it was a huge success doing that and being able to communicate that way and have that transparency was absolutely awesome. A little bit more of a challenge was we had a lot of scope growth, and that was really, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we didn't know what parts of our products were going to be special or difficult to work in and for Lori's team to work on. So we had a little bit of scope growth, but then a success is the output from Lingoport was really high quality code, and it wasn't something that we had to go back and touch or refactor, and everything was really nice and high quality, and our engineers really liked it.
Great, great.
And I would just say from the development point of view too, it was a little bit difficult for us because internationalization affects every part of the code, practically every file that's touched. So it becomes more difficult to break that down into, we can do this during this sprint, and we can do this during this sprint. So that was a learning process, and it was good, and we actually used, of course, CA to track, Agile Central to track our progress, and it made it transparent so that, the CA folks could see what we were working on, that iteration, how we were doing, I could move things around. So I thought that was, that was both a challenge, and then it ended up being a really good way to operate. The other thing I've got to say is we used a communication tool, FlowDoc, and it was awesome because it allowed us to get our PRs reviewed quickly, our questions answered quickly, our designs reviewed, and discussed. I thought that was just a huge way of making sure we were all successful.
I was going to bring that up if you didn't bring that up. I really enjoyed seeing everybody in the flow. It actually even inspired some major new features in our next releases.
Really?
Yeah, we'll show you that actually later after the show. All right, architecture and development concerns. This is a question for Dave again. What were some of your concerns regarding the architecture and development? Well, we really answered a lot of this one already, but let's focus on how those concerns were solved.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's unique about our project is it's not just a straightforward string externalization process in terms of we have what I would call a Salesforce-like data model where our customers can create their own fields, and that makes things quite a bit more complicated, I would say, than our than your standard project. So I think working with Lori's team to develop patterns about how to address those issues. Basically, the process we would usually use is Lori's team would type up a design document describing what they thought the best solution was. They would commit that to GitHub, and then our engineers would review it and make whatever changes are necessary, and then hand it back to Lori's team to implement.
Right. I'm going to just mention both ways that your company. I'm not sure where that music's coming.
It'll stop in a moment.
Me.
That's the pilot of the airplane.
Okay. It's not me either. All right. So maybe somebody left the phone here. All right. So
I think Todd did.
okay. As far as now, I lost my train of thought. I'm just going to go past. I'll remember it, and it wasn't that important, I'm sure, anyway. All right. So Agile Central developers are Agile. How is the internationalization, localization implemented in support of development practices? I'm aiming that at you, Lori and Shay.
I could start this time. Basically, is we use the whole, the GitHub mechanism, the whole PR mechanism in order to get things reviewed. Also, CA has a wonderful way of automated tests so that things can get tested before they get submitted. I felt that was really good. I mean, it means you need to build in system overhead into each sprint in order to get all those tests to pass, actually write new tests. But I felt like that was a way that we could get the quality.
I really wish I knew where that was. Okay. Go ahead, Shay. Sorry.
I think I lost my train of thought.
I could help you stall. I am going to say that what I was going to say before is that one of the things I appreciated just standing back and just looking is like, you guys got back to us really quickly. Like, if we were putting stuff up, like a design document that needed a decision, I won't name names, but we have had services clients that they've sort of like you'd bother them, but they'd have the fire du jour, and so they wouldn't get back to us. We would start to have to work around, and so that always, kind of like the developers don't like it, and everything like that. It just really helps things flow. So appreciate that your team really lives it.
Yeah, you start utilizing resources, and you're not quite there yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think one thing we did in support of that to make sure that we were there to be able to answer your questions and make decisions is we always dedicated a team that was there to, not only were they doing things on our side to help enable you guys, but then they were your point of contact. And using our collaboration tools, like you brought up FlowDoc and stuff, and doing PR requests, that's the way that we work. We make sure that everything is out there and open and you can collaborate easily. So I think in Agile fashion, this project was no different. We were just able to kind of pull that into our normal processes and methodologies and be able to do that for you.
And Shay, just out of curiosity, because I think the audience would like to know how big is that team?
It's normally around, most of our teams are about 5 developers, a QA, a product owner, an architect is normally assigned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, about 8 people overall.
Yeah.
About 8 total?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Right. So this is for Lori and Suzanne. At what points were localization involved? How is that done, and how is it being performed now?
So I would say from the internationalization point of view, once the string externalization framework is in place, once strings have been started to come out of the source code, getting into the resource files, at that point, we were able to onboard the component in our resource management tool, another application that Lingoport provides, that would allow us to more automate the process of getting those strings out to Suzanne and team for translation.
Right, right. You know, once again, just a plug for Lingoport, because the process was so seamless, and because you guys do such a good job on the internationalization side, on our end, it made the job just that much more seamless and error-free and easier to do overall.
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
All right. Can you describe your ongoing process for internationalization and localization and how they fit with your development activities? Are teams more globally minded now? And this is really a comment of like, okay, everything's internationalized, you're moving forward. How's that working, Dave and Shay?
I mean, I'd love to say we have it all figured out, but in good old agile fashion, it's something that we're iterating on. So we did know early on that we wanted the teams to be more globally minded and to consider internationalization in all of their development efforts. So even before we finished anything or had anything to show for it, teams had already started kind of doing little things within their process to test test for internationalization and all of that. So it's stuff that we're trying to figure out what our pain points are right now, how we can automate those, and then we're also working with our outside teams to make sure that we can continuously deliver value to our customers. And one thing in particular is like Vistatec. So we work with Vistatec to translate our resource bundles into the languages that we want, and it was normally at first something you did once a month. But because we work in continuous deployment, we don't want such a gap of value delivery between English and another language. So we're actually working with Vistatec to increase that cadence. Right now it's twice a month, and then we're going to move it forward hopefully to 2 times a week, and then continue to iterate and see how we can incrementally improve that delivery. But there's still things we're trying to figure out around that front. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, and from the development process, we have something called definition of done, which is when we consider a particular piece of work completed. We have had for a while now internationalization as part of that process. So that means that our developers will work with internationalization in the course of whatever they're working on, so that's just required for their particular story. It also means our QA testers will test internationalization before they say this is okay and before it's ready to be merged into master. We also have some automation in place. We have automation for things like if your code contains a string that's not externalized, we have automation that'll catch that and fail the build. So it won't be allowed to be merged to master if you have an issue like that. It's not quite sophisticated enough to catch all the issues right now, but some of the basic issues it can catch. We also have automation wired in with the LRM software to catch issues within the resource bundles themselves. So if somebody commits something where there's a problem in the resource bundle, that will cause let to go red and won't be able to merge to master as well. We're currently working on increasing automation for the actual shipping the resource bundles off to Vistatec to get them translated, and also the reintegration of that code after it comes back from Vistatec. That's an ongoing process right now, like Shay said.
Right. I'm thinking you and Olivier have had many discussions.
Yes, Olivier has been enormously helpful.
Right. So Olivier is from he runs our product development here at Lingoport, and that's on top of Globalizer and LRM, as you mentioned, which is Lingoport Resource Manager and all that. All right. So what about I'll just a little plug for Derek's team. I'm running a little over, but Derek's team is out in Raleigh. That's kind of interesting that you started a team around globalization. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. I mean, we so the team out in Raleigh is Derek and Brittany, so they're the leaders on that team, product owner and the dev manager. And basically, we allocated one of the teams in our release train to make sure that they are there to support Lingoport when defects come up or resource bundles need to be sent or brought back in. Right now, as Dave said, that's not automated. So when those resource bundles go to Vistatec and get translated and come back in, they need to be able to merge that back in. And when we,
I think I get you automated on that.
I know, we're working on it. But and then, you know, the really great thing is that Lori's team is very well knowledged in some of the best practices. So when things come up, they can suggest ways to implement things or fix things, and Derek's team is there and allocated to go ahead and resolve them so that we can continue to move everything forward.
And I think our goal with that team is that, you know, they've been working on some of those automation pieces, and we'd like to be able to, you know, not have that team working on globalization full time once all the pieces are implemented. So our goal is to get that work done, and then once that's in place, just have it be a part of the normal workflow for all the teams, rather than having a full-time team dedicated to globalization indefinitely.
Yeah, that's actually a great thing to bring up, because Lori and I were talking about this earlier. Going forward, it's no longer just going to live on one team, but it's spread out across the entire train, and all teams are going to be expected to do the same thing that the one team did. So it helps spread the knowledge.
I think we talked a lot about this, but what are some of the overall benefits of how the services and software have been delivered and are being used? Dave and Shay, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think for the internationalization piece, it was probably cheaper for us to contract with Lingoport than for us to do it in-house. If we did it in-house, that also would have reduced our bandwidth for producing the other features that our customers are asking for. So that was really helpful. As far as the software, we talked a little bit about how LRM we're using to automate some of our processes. I think that in our kind of development process, any automation is kind of a requirement for anything. So that's kind of a base level of support for us.
Also the expertise. I mean, it was really helpful to have somebody to help us along the journey in the path of what we need to do and some of the best practices and have you considered this or that, because we didn't know anything about this before we started. So that's one of the major benefits.
All right, so we're ready now for open Q&A, and sorry we ran about 3 minutes over goal, and also apologize for some of the technical difficulties. But Simon, you're in charge of questions. What do we got?
We have some interesting questions for the panel, so I hope you're ready. We have a question from David Lavelle. And the first question is around Section 508, if you're familiar with that. And it is, have any of you been involved with Section 508 compliance, accessibility, and does that fit into an internationalization effort well? So we're starting with the easy ones.
I can talk a little bit about that from Agile Central's perspective. We do some work with 508. That's typically what would be called accessibility or A11Y. We do not consider that part of the internationalization work. That's a separate effort for us. That we typically handle that internally with again, I mentioned definition of done. Accessibility is also one of our definition of done criteria. So a story is not marked as complete until it has a base level of support. And then there may be further support if it's a product that has to be 508 compliance, which is even a higher hurdle to get over. So
I'm going to add as like on the software side for our own software development, Section 508 comes up a lot. We have to date done nothing about it, but it's sort of on the periphery of our product planning radar, but it's very much on the top. We haven't done like a market study or anything like that, but it comes up regularly because the way our software works, it would also be a applicable 508. All right.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. I hope that's okay, David. Thank you for asking that question. The next question is from Michael O'Connor, and it's, how do you test for or avoid to begin with context issues within the translation. So how do you test for or avoid to begin with the context issues within the translation? That's from Mike.
Sure. So CA actually has a globalization team that we would send once our resource bundles get merged back in, that team has QA resources that go through the product and test, and they're normally native speakers. If it's the team members that we have in-house are not native speakers, then the globalization team has specific contractors that they would reach out to. So we've done that with some of our languages, and we also are fortunate enough to have people on our teams that are native. Like German was our first language. We actually have several native German speakers within our train right now that we have used the product in their day-to-day work and let us know about any context issues. We also, when we were kind of towards the end of the internationalization and efforts, we went private beta with specific customers in those locale areas to also have them let us know. I think we did like a dozen customers in Germany and had them tell us if anything felt funny to them or didn't look right or words were different, but we kind of use a hodgepodge of solutions for that.
One thing that we do that's useful is we can turn on features for particular customers. So that means that we can just provide logins to the product for our globalization team or for Vistatec or for whoever's doing the validation, and they can just do it in the app. That's quite a bit easier than trying to like take screenshots or videos and then shipping that off. So that's something that I would recommend as a way to turn it on in the application, so you don't have to do kind of recorded sessions within the development build.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Michael, I hope that answers your question. We have the next question from Patrick Kelly, and that question is, are there any remaining pain points between the internationalization, dev, lock teams that still need to be resolved? So it's about pain points.
You brought up pain.
I kind of brought up the work in progress of automation and kind of going from globalization to localization. Is there any pain points still around that? I think is what that's asking.
Yeah, I think we still have pain points around the pieces that we have not fully automated yet, that we're still working on. There are also still pain points around, as I said, we have a lot of different repositories and tech stacks, and the developers, the architecture design is not the same for all of this. So, having the developers just have the knowledge about how to do it in this particular code base versus this other one is there. There are, I think, some of the things we have, the architecture we decided to has client-side focused, and there are some issues about how the resource bundles get loaded and that kind of thing that we're still working on as well.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. We have a question from Robert Milo, and Robert asks that before the Rally software, have you used other Agile software? If so, what were the advantages related to, obviously, internationalization and localization? So a pre-Rally question.
I don't even think I understand that.
I'm not sure I totally understand, so...
I think Robert is asking, have you used other Agile software, and what were the advantages related to localization?
Sure. I have used other Agile software. I haven't used them in a localized or internationalized manner because I am in the U.S. and only speak English. So I don't have context to answer that, unfortunately. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. And Robert, if you want to get back in touch and share any more of your question, we'll be happy to answer it. Sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say something there.
I would assume the benefits of internationalization and localization are similar for any product. Is that, if you have distributed teams, if you have, part of your company is Germany and part of your part of your company is in India and part of your company is in America, you can use the same tool and understand each other.
Okay.
Good answer.
And a question from Michael again. Thank you, Michael. Michael is asking, what types of methods do Vistatec use to speed up the delivery of translating the resource bundles to fit those agile cycle sprints? So what are the Vistatec methods used in speeding up those resource bundles?
I think that kind of the long and short of that answer is we customize that to pretty much every customer. Do you have a specific type that I know we don't work together specifically, so do you have a specific type that you're using with the team that you do work with at this point?
I think the way that that Vistatec supports us in the quicker delivery is, I mean, we're sending everything over in a lot smaller batches. So instead of trying to wait a month and kind of build everything up, we're doing it continuously, so it's smaller effort, and they're able to more easily adjust and work with us around that. It's a lot easier than if we were kind of holding up all the translation debt and then sending it and then expecting it back in a week.
So the smaller batches create less of an opportunity for a bottleneck.
Correct, and it allows your teams to be able to, it sounds scary at first when you think about, oh,
yeah.
I have to translate more than once a month now, but when you're getting it and it's a quarter of the amount, you're like, oh, it actually takes me less time and it's a little bit easier.
So it's much more efficient.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing I should mention is on the receiving side, using the LRM software, it's able to import those translated files kind of more automatically, and less chance of error because the new translations are being merged in as they come, and then it's gets pushed out to master. So I think that allows for that quick, fast turnaround.
So just to paint a picture, the software Lori is referring to, LRM or Lingoport Resource Manager, it's connecting with the target repositories, the development repository, not the TMS or whatever. And it says, it actually counts strings that have been added. It has the idea of a baseline. It shows that in the dashboard. You see the amount of words. You can either have LRM send strings out automatically during a fixed period, like every 2 weeks, every week, or whatever, or there's a little button on the dashboard that you click and it says, push this out, and it automatically audits those files. Make sure that there isn't like a problem that's going to propagate now through automation. It sends those what we call prep kits, those kits of the latest translations, which are configurable, to Vistatec. Vistatec then gets the files in a very constrained format, so they're not having to spend a lot of QA time on files. They know they get a file that's good, even if it's only got 86 words in it. They can run it through their system quickly. If it's fully integrated, when it's completely done, it gets pushed all the way, when Vistatec's done, back into the repository, and voila, you have the complete cycle turnaround in lots of little pieces.
Right.
That tend to add up over time,
right.
But lots of little pieces, and it's awesome for continuous deployment.
So it's much more seamless because there's
right.
smaller pieces going back and forth all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers the question. Thank you for your second question, Michael O'Connor. This is from Robert O'Keefe, and it's a Lingoport question. It's about, are development teams using the Lingoport plugin for IDE to scan code before it's committed? And if that's applicable, how successful is this at preventing localization issues?
I know we used it certainly during the implementation. Dave, are you using Light or anything like that? During commit?
We're not using that currently. What we use, most of our UI development happens in JavaScript currently, and so that's the entry point that we are most worried about targeting to make sure it's internationalized. So we have an ESLint plugin that we use to scan that code. We would like to investigate using some of the the CLI tools from Lingoport to validate our Java on the back end. Our Java typically, and enclosure as well, those have less UI, so they're less likely to contain problems. But we currently don't have automation in place for those, and we'd like to essentially pull in the CLI tool to do that.
Thank you.
For the JavaScript environment that we use, the ESLint plugin, the ESLint integrates with many editors, so that does show issues inside your editor.
The other thing that we did set up is like a dashboard for each of the projects, at least all the components that Lingoport works on, and we use Globalizer as part of our process of internationalization, and then this system does, run a nightly scan. We still have some work to do to get rid of false positives. We've got some great features coming out soon that will help us, blanketly clean those up. But they were definitely useful for us in terms of trying to make sure we got all the strings out in the components we were looking at for international.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And just the last question, Suzanne, I think it's back to you. It's a question what you were touching on earlier in terms of, I suppose, how Vistatec is a little bit bespoke in terms of providing agile solutions. The question from Jeff today is, how is Vistatec being more agile to turn around translations faster besides smaller batches? What else does Vistatec do?
Well, we typically have, in this particular case, because we have connectivity and automation already built into our process, that makes things faster in addition to the smaller batches that we had talked about. So again, I'm going to go back to, it's going to depend on the requirements of each client, and we typically will, I think the differentiator with Vistatec versus maybe other providers is that we will automate and create connectivity where it isn't, and we will come in and look for that, and then we will provide that to the client depending on what their workflow is, their processes, and what they need and what their end result is. So to answer the question is, it would depend on the requirements, but we would definitely come in and make suggestions for automation anywhere that we are capable of doing so. I hope that answers it in a kind of an indirect way.
Okay, it does. Thank you. We have a couple more questions just came in here, so if everybody's okay, I just want to quickly go through them. We have a question from Alex regarding automation tools for mobile testing. Do you have any favorite preferred tools if you're testing for mobile projects? Are you performing unit tests or doing UI tests? So automation tools for mobile testing.
So I don't think it would, we don't do a lot of mobile testing. I think the type of automation testing that we're doing would be very similar because the type of testing we're doing is looking at the source code and looking at the resource bundles. So those methods would be applicable to any type of code base. We don't do any localization or internationalization testing that's specific, automated testing that's specific to, actually bringing the app up and doing something like a Selenium test or something like that. Typically, that level of testing would be done by, like the language validation testing that would be done by Vistatec or somebody else. And
Vistatec does offer mobile application testing. It just, again, depends on the client. Some have such high security requirements that we have to do it on site, or we can do it in our labs in Dublin, Ireland, or we also have the ability to have the testing done in a software environment. So it's like you're in the application, but you're actually on, on your PC. So it just depends on what the requirement is, but that offering is available. And you probably...
Yeah, I'm going to add that, it really wasn't the case for Agile Central, but for a lot of companies, it's almost like a throwback to the old days when you had different flavors of Unix and Windows managers and platform-specific widgets and all that kind of stuff. Because you you have companies with essentially 3 to 4 code bases. One is the web-based interface. There'll be a desktop client that's usually some legacy thing, and then 2 different mobile interfaces for iOS and Android. Fortunately, we have made Globalizer so that we can scan for each one of those targets. There's very, very strong Android. Android has its own sort of way of doing things, and it actually makes it very predictable in terms of code scanning. Then there's both Objective-C and Swift support on the iOS platform, and then lots of different programming languages used on that. Often some flavor of JavaScript, and then on the desktop it can be all kinds of stuff. I mean, you see some really old stuff.
All the way to wearables.
Right. Well, you still even see BB coming up, but anyway, so we've had to support all those environments as our products have matured.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope that answers that, Alex. Next question is from Elisabetta Massini, and it's around word counts and statement of work estimates. So how are you handling statement of work estimates versus actual word counts, including reuse in an agile context?
In terms of word counts of the words to be translated, or in terms of the work required to internationalize?
It's not specified, Elizabeth. If you want to clarify that, you can, but it's not clarified.
I mean, for localization, we just kind of have a budget every quarter that's kind of open that we haven't gone over yet. So it's just, you know, however many words we need to get translated, we get those translated unless we hit that budget ceiling. And as far as the internationalization, Lori's team took an analysis of the source code at the beginning of the process to see how many strings need to be externalized.
And just by the way, I just put up a this is just an example dashboard. You can look at this yourself. You don't even have to have login privileges. If you just go to dashboard.lingoport.com, you'll see that it will measure all kinds of things from internationalization issues to localization. We actually count words in our dashboard when we point at resource files. So that's very easily measured.
Yeah, you can tell how many are going to go out.
You'll see how many are new, how many are in the whole file, all that kind of stuff. You actually have a whole trail of that sort of thing.
Thank you, Adam. Elizabeth just communicated it's the actual word count she was referring to, including fuzzy matches, 100% matches, etc.
No, I'm strictly saying words. It's not doing that type of interpretation. That's really up to the provider, and we're not trying to be a localization system, a tool rather. We're really focused on what's going on in the repo. What are the developers doing as a company?
Thank you, and I hope that covers the question or the answer to the question, and thank you for the clarification. Last question is from Robert, again, Robert Milo. Thank you for your second question, Robert. And Robert really wants to ask, do you have mechanisms to identify hard-coded strings in the code?
Yes. When I had mentioned that we use Globalizer to scan, that is exactly what it's doing. It's looking for hard-coded strings in the source code. Right. And we use those numbers not only to help us in our refactoring, so we know where to go and what to fix, but also when we were initially scoping the effort for the project, it helps us there as well.
Right. So, for instance, you can see what we're detecting here. It's actually more than just embedded strings, but concatenations as well. And every one of these we drill right down to the line of code and report on and the like. And we also have, sort of developer tools for automating extraction where it can be automated.
And that's also what the ESLint tool that we use does. Globalizer is actually more flexible and will hit more use cases. It's just in our particular environment, our devs were just more familiar with that particular tool. that was a plugin that our organization wrote ourselves. I don't think there are any IATN ES1 plugins that are out there.
I can tell a lot goes into that when you want to make it work in one place. All right.
Okay, well, we've had some great questions there. That's the end of the questions that we've been asked here live. So thank you very much to everybody who's asked us some questions, and thank you to everybody there for answering them. There were some interesting questions there.
Thank you, and Simon, thanks for your help in coordinating all this, and thank you to all our guests.
Thank you to CA.
This is very unusual, but usually our clients are far-flung all over the world, but in this case, Suzanne works in Denver, and Shay and David, Rally's headquarters, Agile Central's headquarters.
Agile, okay, we do it.
Their headquarters are right here in Boulder. We're in Boulder, Colorado as well, so we're probably less than a mile away. There's even a bike path between us. So.
Very good.
Very good. So I wanted to thank everybody for taking part today. Thank you for everybody who's registered, and thank you for everybody who's joined us here live today. As we said at the very beginning of today's webinar, a full recording will be available to everybody shortly after the webinar. And obviously a big thank you to everybody who's asked questions, and especially to Adam and Laurie from Lingoport, to David and Shay from CA, and to Suzanne, Frank from Vistatec. We really do appreciate your time and your expertise today on the webinar. For anybody who's listening, and for anybody who's watching this on a recording, if you'd like more information on future webinars that we hold, you can follow Vistatec on the usual social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., where we normally post upcoming webinars. But for further information on today's topics, there are links on screen. You can visit lingoport.com, vistatec.com, or ca.com, and there's some explanation there in terms of the CA Agile Central link for people that are watching this on record. It's there on the slide for you. So thank you very much indeed for everybody to attending, and thank you for everybody for taking part today. We hope you've enjoyed this webinar.